Okay, with this video, I'd like to go ahead and talk to you about putting the system I've told you about into practice, into an understanding of what you're looking at in this particular hoax, this drill that's turned into the idea of concern, where the energy that you give it then gives the principalities, the cities, the principalities, the idea of authority, power to do things, because a population of people believe that the stories they're being told are in fact actual, real incidents happening to people, and through their concern and through their natural empathy, these stories are then used against those same people. All right. So then you have going just to the picture, you have this ludicrous idea of, had real people been pulled out of a hole dead, they wouldn't then be left on the street covered in a plastic tarpaulin to bake in the sun. It's as if people have lost all sense of who they are, and the idea of humanity and the idea of true concern does not apply at all, because you are looking down a hole, quite literally, as these characters are doing, looking down a hole and feigning concern, because you quite frankly don't care about these dummies under the tarpaulins. You only care that you believe that you feel anything for these characters, but you do in fact feel nothing. All right, that's just a fact. What you are and what you feel is the stoking of your own fire and your own ego, because that is what then drives you. All right. So I'd like to go ahead and here's the thing. Let's get this straight. I'm not talking to you if you understand that this is a hoax and things like this do not concern you, and you're not coming to this channel, my space, in order to be told that this is in fact a hoax. Because if you can't understand this, then you are also chasing your own desire to believe it, and you are asking somebody else to talk you out of your deception. That's not what I'm here for. I could care less. All right? So don't ask me to talk you out of your deception. That won't work. But what I will do is show you what I know. I'm just a guy going down the straight path, who is saved by the grace of Jesus Christ, and I'm just going down the straight path. And if you choose to listen, and then you choose to then put to the test what I tell you, so be it. All right? But do not get in my way, and do not expect me to stop what I'm doing in order to convince you of something that you refuse to look at by yourself. All right? That's what I need you to understand. All right? Please. So then take a look at what I've talked to you before about the idea of the Zion or the seven. Okay, so the 1 by 1, 3 utility workers descended into a manhole. 1 by 1, they didn't die. All right. Let me make this very clear. Whether you believe it or not, it's irrelevant to me, because what I'm saying is that you will be responsible for the witness of your own mouth and what you put into the air, the magic words that you speak unto others. You will be held accountable for and to. If you don't believe that, that's fine. Then bugger off, go do something else, because this is not for you. All right? Have a great day. Bye. All right? For the rest who are interested in looking at this idea and looking at the understanding of numbers and how the so-called Kabbalah tree of life and the usage of numbers is nothing more than is a map or a way to illustrate what your mind is taking in. And it's just an example or a picture to illustrate the functionality of an idea that then is put into words, into video, into spoken language that you then either believe or disbelieve, and then that fire, that inspiration, is what leads you into action. All right, so 1 by 1, 2, 3, that's going to be 5, 2 more, that's your 7. So you know this is a hoax just by the fact that it's leading you into the idea. Let me show you that. Into this right side, the idea of the Zion, or the idea of the Venus, the idea of love, or the illumination, all right, the false light, all right, and then that will be kindled by the rest of these numbers, and especially with the idea of the 47, the idea of mercy, that meaning that you feel that by giving these stories you're concerned, that you are then showing mercy unto those so-called victims and their family. You're showing your concern, right? So it's actually just a self-serving delusion. So if you recall, I talked to you earlier about the idea of Tet, or the idea of the 9, the Tet offensive, the offensive information that you are then led to believe. All right, so then you look at how this foundation is laid. The story is the foundation, and then upon that foundation, the scaffolding through the idea of numbers and influences is built upon that foundation. If you choose to believe that that's a solid foundation, then this apparatus, this structure, is then built upon that foundation, right? And it's just, and as long as you believe it and continue to accept the so-called details, the building, the structure becomes bigger and bigger and bigger, and thus the idea takes on a life of its own. You've heard that. And then all of the details that come in later, you will easily believe because you believe the foundation was solid. All right. So then you take a look at this, the 15, all right, that's going into your 6. And then plus the third worker. So then you transfer that into the 3rd or 3. So then that's your 69 idea, or your idea of the 69 or the 96. Recall I told you about the idea of the devil in the details, or the idea of the 8, which is just right here, a so-called 8-year veteran dealing with the idea of the cattail, or the devil in the details. All right. Please then notice here, the next paragraph down, you're going to have the name Ramsey, or Ramsey, coming, and a lot of that goes across several hoaxes that you've seen in the past, but it's most relevant in the idea of what's called Ramsey's theorem. All right, which is the point that 6 becomes 7, or the idea of the hourglass, the point of which, the narrow point that the sand passes through the hourglass at its most constricted point. All right, that is the tip of the spear idea. That is the top of the pyramid, which then leads into the 6, which is the manifestation within the physical world, into the consciousness, or the idea of the Zion, the mind, the 7. All right, that's an understanding of what Ramsey's theorem is all about. So what I want right here, all right, and then you can go ahead and see that I've just put 3 colors out. I'm going to go ahead and add in some numbers. All right, that's going to be a visual illustration of what would be called the so-called tree of life. Let me show you that. Now I've laid mine out slightly in a different formation, but the numbers are, of course, line up exactly the same. It's just a little bit easier for you to look at it this way without all the extra lines. And I'd like to show you something. Okay. So within the middle pillar is what you're going to see is going to be your 9/11 pillar. It includes the numbers your 6, your 9, and then your 1 at the top, and then the 10 at the bottom. Please recall that the 10 is the idea of the return, which is where you get your 101, which is why when you go to school or college, all your classes begin with English, math, 101. That is the entry point into a new subject or a higher level understanding. Dropping that 0 is where you run into the 911 or the 911, or in the reverse, the 611. All right, the 611 adding up then into your 8, or causing you to go into the loop or into the cattail idea. Okay. So then on the right hand side, or the so-called mercy side, dealing with the idea of the feminine love energy, the idea of the moon influence, Isis, and all that, because they're using this system against you. They're not using it for a good purpose, so therefore it's going to be the reflected, so-called, put in quotes if you like, evil aspects of this system. So then you have the 2, the 4, the 7 leading into your 13, which a lot of times you'll see reflected as a 31 in these hoaxes, but then that adding into the 4, then you reflect that 4, that gives you your 44, and or the idea of the 8. All right, the idea again of the cattail. All right. Then you have on the left-hand side the law side, the logic side of the 3, the 5, the 8, leading into your 16 or the 7. Again, the Zion, the return to Zion, or the mind weapon, the idea of making up your mind. All right, so you decided that you were given an illustration through video, through words, through some other media format, and you chose to believe that. You made up your mind. You gave it that fire. All right. So then if you notice, again, as another indication of where this comes from, if I then take the numbers above in the reduction method, the 16, the 13, the 7, the 8, the 4, and the 7, all right, then you'll notice that the 2 numbers missing are, of course, the 9 and the 5, all right? And that's very important to understand what those 2 numbers represent as far as a mental construct, okay, or an emotion, let's put it that way. So then if you follow that line and say that the fire was then taken from you, and it's of course needs to be replaced with another fire, then that 5, that spot, is then right here. This relates to the idea of fire, or the idea of the reflected red being taken from you and replaced with what would be a made up or a lie, of course, a false fire or a false fallen light. All right. And of course, then you take the idea, the 9th position, or what would be then the foundation. That is, once you believe these lie stories and you fall within the foundation of these, Masonic Jews, these Kabbalistic Jews, these all these, and all the groups that go with them, you then fall under the light, or you fall under the spirit of the fallen ideals, or the idea of the fallen desire, because this is dealing with a subconscious or a need for you to be part of a desire, or to have your desires satisfied. All right. So then that's a rough outline of what this system is. All right. So then, protect yourself by not falling for these lies. All right. And make sure that you study and approve every word and test every word that you hear. So this is a graphical illustration of what Ramsey's theorem is in looking at the idea of the missing numbers, the two that I talked about, the 5 and the 9, the 5 being made up of, for simplistic terms, the person, you, the idea of the senses, and then that being shown, of course, in these three different sections, 5, 5, and 5, of course, leading into the number 15, and or reducing to 6. Okay, with the center point being the 7th point, or the idea of the mind Zion, the 6 into 7 idea, just so you can see how that works. Also, please understand this about the idea and the illustration of using the red, blue, and green. Yellow, when you take a look at yellow, that's a combination of red and green. All right, these others, red, blue, and green, are in fact the idea of 255, which adds up, of course, to your 12 or your 3, 3, 6, 9. Indication that they are by themselves a whole. All right, and then thus this being a additive of these two. All right, that's why then in that picture that you saw, hold on, let me reduce that. That's why then that you see red, blue, green, but the idea of the yellow would be the light or the illustration of that idea being believed. All right, and it would fall within the 3, 6, the 9, the idea of these triangles. All right, which is nothing more than the encapsulation of the ideas, and then if this is a graphical illustration of how your mind functions, then it builds up an idea or it builds up a belief. And then as long as you can logically place those new details onto your foundation that you initially believe, the structure will stand, all right? Until something comes in to dislodge that foundation, and of course that whole building or idea then comes crashing down, and it must be discarded. So then, just in another way of showing you the 5 and the 5 and the 9, those two missing numbers, adding in with the 11 being that's just a combination of two ones, so it's above your standard set of numbers. It's just a mirror of the one. Then that is where you run into your 7, which is your Zion number, and also then your 9, 11, okay? Because you skip the 9 and you jump to 11, which is why that 9/11 coding is so prevalent within the higher-minded hoaxes and the hoaxes that are considered to be more consequential to the direction of the population. All right, so that's why your 9/11 hoaxes are going to be the bigger events. And of course, you notice the 7 and the 11, 7 plus the 2 leading into your 9, or the TED or offensive information. I'm going to leave at the end of this video my 9/11 echo video I did a couple years back, and maybe your second time through you'll see the understanding of how these ideas are built up in people's mind, and from generation to generation the lies are passed down, so of course that the sins or the ideas of the fathers are visited upon the children. All right, that's what that means. The ideas of the last generation are then passed to the next generation because they didn't take the time to understand that they had been lied to. Have a great night. Bye-bye.
Good evening. For 4 days now, some of the 20th century's most extraordinary diplomatic maneuvers have been taking place in Moscow. Vice President Richard Nixon and Soviet Premier Nikita Khrushchev play the rules of polite diplomacy, it would seem, and are engaging in rough and tumble topics range from rockets, communism and capitalism, war and freedom, to the kitchen sink. The words sound fierce and harsh, as if they might increase international tension of the world into a new Cold War.
I wouldn't back down now if my life depended on it.
New York City was shrouded in a smothering blanket of fog when scores of people heard a low-flying plane heading south. Then an explosion. An Army bomber lost in the overcast had crashed into the towering Empire State Building. Parts of it blasting completely through the
The Empire State Building, like all New York, was hidden by fog as a Mitchell bomber, trying to reach Newark Airport, crashed into the tallest structure in the world. 13 died, including the crew members, 2 Army men and a Navy hitchhiker. What happened will never be known, for the flyers in the crash are all dead, and eyewitness accounts vary. One thing is certain, the pilot was off the radio beam. The 79th floor was hardest hit by the crash. Some people thought it was a Jap balloon bomb. Firemen had to drag their hoses 11 stories to reach the flames on the 79th floor, as many elevators were knocked out of order. Paul Deering was blown from his office as the plane crashed. Disaster units organized in wartime were quick to respond to aid the wounded.
City's history. The disaster on 34th Street.
Suddenly, it has become as much a part of 20th century life as the whir of your vacuum cleaner. It's a report from man's farthest frontier, radio signal transmitted by the Soviet Sputnik, the first man-made satellite as it passed over New York earlier today.
There are some instances where you may be ahead of us. For example, in the development of your rockets. But in order for both of us to benefit, you see, you never concede anything.
In what are they ahead of us? Wrong. I share the enthusiasm of Soviet engineers about the cleverness of the American people, but we too, as for 42 years we have gone ahead, our nostrils. No, don't kill flies with our nostrils. For 42 years we have gone ahead. For 42 years we have gone ahead, and when we shall overtake you at the crossroads, we shall wave at you.
I'm not sure, I said, if I'm capable of killing you. Try me, he said.
For example, it's deadly.
This coffee is criminal.
Honey, you killed a petunias.
Then you admit it. Your coffee really is murder.
Papa eating my coffee. It's murder.
Folgers, mountain grown for richer flavor.
Well, all right.
You know it's a crime.
Maybe we loved cinema so much we annihilated it, I ventured. It's possible, he concurred.
There it was. Another post-war one right before your eyes.
This, Mr. Khrushchev, is the
Television.
one of the most advanced developments in communication that we have, at least in our... This very conversation immediately. And this increase in communication will teach us some things, and it will teach you some things, too.
If I don't know everything, then I would say that you know absolutely nothing about communism. Nothing except fear.
You're making a fool of yourself. You think so? Do you really think so? Honestly and truly, is that what you think? Yes, that's what I think. Well, Sheriff, the laugh's on you. When word gets out that your deputy and ex-best friend has been jailed for a minor offense, you'll be the fool. Your mind's really made up, huh? I wouldn't back down now if my life depended on it.
I felt my own reality slipping away. Felt that I risked becoming no more than a character in someone else's film. I decided to accept the situation and to play along with it, sensing that a failure to do so could prove catastrophic.
There it was. Another post-war one right before your eyes.
This, Mr. Khrushchev, is the
Television.
one of the most advanced developments in communication that we have, at least in our country.
Good evening, television consumers. This misty bit of ectoplasm forming on the inside of your television screen is one Alfred Hitchcock.